you should be able to see on your screen the first slide, hopefully.
Yep.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that I'm sharing the right screen.
Yeah.
So this evening, our topic is about how to know if you're ready to purchase a home. So obviously, a lot of our Family Promise, BHC residents and participants are renters. But a common question comes up quite a bit in terms of how can I plan long-term? How can I prepare to potentially purchase a home? So if it's not in the short run, in the long term, how can I make progress and sort of have that as one of my goals? Obviously, being here in Los Angeles presents a challenge. High cost of living, right? High property values. It's not cheap here. It's not inexpensive. And so while, hi Arlene, while the process of planning is essentially the same no matter where you may want to purchase a home, I think being here in LA presents an extra set of hurdles, if you will. So what we talk about this evening, we'll definitely keep in mind the fact that we do live in a high cost of living area. Real estate here is at a premium. And so it presents other planning challenges in terms of down payment, in terms of qualifying for mortgages, because the mortgage amount may be higher. So whether you want to ultimately purchase here in California or whether you have plans to maybe purchase out of state, I think the process remains the same, right? So with that sort of caveat or with that disclosure, let's move forward. And what I wanted to focus on this evening is considering these questions. I think this is a good sort of layout or plan for knowing if you're ready to buy, right? So before we start watching HGTV and Property Brothers and things like that and start, going to Home Depot and, figuring out how to remodel and redecorate and start having, these dreams, if you will, I think we have to practically walk through these 6 questions, right? Because purchasing a home generally means that now life is stable. You maybe have stable employment, your job is not in danger. You've sort of reached that stage where your finances are in order. And so the first thing to sort of consider is, are you financially secure? And if you're thinking about purchasing a home and you've sort of gone beyond that initial dream stage of the type of home that you would want and how you would remodel it and landscape it and so on, if you're really getting serious, that probably means that you're financially secure. Because as much as you may want to stop renting and start owning, I mean, buying a home is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it is a serious financial decision. It's a serious investment. And like we were saying, especially in this area, it could mean going into something that is sort of beyond our means, right? And it is a big decision that could ultimately have consequences on our financial stability and our overall like long-term financial plan. So I realize that sort of the American dream is built on the premise that we have to be homeowners and we get to have pride of ownership and it's a long-term investment and it will be my retirement plan and every sort of benefit. Yeah, absolutely. That goes with homeowning. I think we just have to walk carefully through the process and really be serious and think through. And the first consideration is, are you financially secure? And we'll get there here in just a second. How long do you want to stay in the area? I think that's an important consideration that we don't entirely think through. Are you ready for home ownership? What does that mean in terms of your responsibilities? Do you want to move from renter and it's somebody else's problem to, oh my gosh, I'm a property manager now. And I've got to take care of stuff when things break. What kind of home do you want, right? Again, let's move beyond the dream and get really specific about what we're looking for and what that's going to ultimately mean in terms of costs and what we're going to have to do to prepare for that kind of specific home. Can you save for a down payment, right? This will be critical too. And we'll look at some ways in which we know or that can signal to us that we're ready. And we've been talking about this for weeks now. What is your credit history? What is your credit score? What have you been doing to improve that and build that? Because the time is going to come where you're going to need to get pre-qualified potentially for a mortgage. And lenders are going to be looking at that credit history. They're going to be looking at that credit score. And that's going to play a big part in determining interest rates. It's going to play a big part in determining how much you can borrow. And so it's critical that your credit score health, if you will, is on the up and up. I'm going to change the slide and hopefully it doesn't turn to a green screen.
Yay!
Okay, good. So let's address the first question. Are you financially secure? How do I know, right? So I'm done watching the home improvement shows. I'm done, walking the aisles of Home Depot and Lowe's. Now I'm getting really serious, right? So we have to determine if we're financially secure. So the first thing to really look at is, do I have steady employment, right? So it starts to worry me when folks start talking about purchasing a home when they've gotten to part-time employment or they just switched over to becoming self-employed. There hasn't been a long enough period of time of them bringing in stable income, right, in order to sufficiently plan with, right? So even people who get a new job, let's say, and they're earning more income will say, okay, great. I'm in a better position now. I'm earning more income. Must be time for me to buy a home. Not necessarily, right? So what we really want to be looking at is how stable is this new income? How stable is your employment? How long have you been with your current employer? What is their current situation during this COVID, during this pandemic, right? Some of us have moved to working remotely. Vivian was just talking about that. And so what you should really be tapping into is with your employer, figuring out how long is this going to be happening, right? How long does your employer foresee you doing this, right? Can it facilitate a move? Can it facilitate a purchase? What if, because of COVID, your employer leaves California, your company moves out of state? Then what? You just rush to buy a home and now all of a sudden your employer is taking off, right? So that's what I mean by assessing sort of the steadiness of your current employment. Are you having to patch together multiple streams of income to pay your bills, right? Do you have a side hustle? Do you have part-time employment? How many jobs do you have to patch together to meet your current expenses? If you're having to do that, taking on home ownership might not be the right time for that, right? The next question to consider, along with are you financially secure, is how much do you have in your emergency fund? We've been talking about this in the past in our workshops as well, is what is the right amount to have in savings, right? We said rule of thumb was generally that you would have anywhere between 3 to 6 months of income saved in just a rainy day fund, cash reserve, emergency fund. And sometimes we've even sort of questioned, how is that even possible to have 3 to 6 months of income saved up and be covering all my bills, right, with the income that I'm generating? To save up that amount of money, for some of us, it's just not possible. Then in between all of that, life's what ifs happen. And so our savings will go up, and then all of a sudden we'll have some what if scenarios and we have to purchase 4 new tires or whatever it is, and that savings drops back down. So can we realistically have enough in an emergency fund that if we took on a home purchase, if we were to lose our employment, if we were to have a bad string of months, would we be putting our mortgage payment in jeopardy? And that is something certainly we wouldn't want to be falling behind on or defaulting on, right? So this is really sort of critical, where we have to be serious about that emergency fund has to be able to provide 2, 3, possibly 4 months of that mortgage payment should something happen to your income, right? We saw sort of the panic that sort of came about around March, April, right? When COVID hit, and we were worried about making our bills, making our rent, right? So imagine having owned a home at that time as well. If you did not have an emergency fund, even if you got that stimulus check, still probably would not have been enough, right? So we don't want to put ourselves prematurely into a position where now we have this debt and now we're defaulting on that as well. The other thing that we need to assess and consider is how much debt we currently have, right? It's okay to have debt and be able to purchase a home. That's fine, right? But how much debt do we actually have, right? Because if you have too much debt, you're not going to be able to qualify for a mortgage. Lenders are going to look at what's called your debt to income ratio, right? So the abbreviation for that is DTI, and you probably will see it if you've been looking around at purchasing a home, right? When you go through what's called pre-qualification, right? You want to see how much you can borrow to see if you can even buy a home. One of the things that lenders will ask for on that pre-qualification application is, what is your debt to income ratio, right? So what lenders are looking for is that your debt to income ratio is less than 36%. So how can you do some rough math to figure out, where is my debt to income ratio? All you need to do, and I know all of you are budgeting because you've been to all of our workshops, so this will be easy. But if you need to go get some numbers, that's fine too, right? All you need to do is add up your total monthly debt. So all your monthly debt. So credit card debt, student loan debt, a car payment, whatever payments you have, your expenses. That's why I'm saying a budget would make that easy. You would just go to your monthly expense line and there you would have it. And you divide that number, you divide that figure by your gross income. You'll get a decimal, right? And you would just multiply it by 100 to get a percent. So lenders, in order to qualify, are looking ideally for you to be under 36%. So if we divide our monthly debt by our gross income, what we're bringing in, and you can tell even that is not exactly accurate, right? Because gross income is what you make before taxes are taken out, right? So actually the money that we're working with is what we net, what we catch in the net, right? After taxes are taken out. But debt to income is using what you make before taxes, not what ends up in your pocket. So that's slightly like inaccurate in terms of our own budgeting, but that's what lenders will look at.
Why, Bryan, why would they do gross? Because it's obviously like my gross income between my net is like $700 per paycheck.
Right. I mean, yeah, it can be significant,
Yeah.
but all lenders are really looking for is your earning power and potential, right? So that's something that we as consumers need to consider, is that, okay, great, I may qualify for a loan under this math, but then in terms of actual dollars that I end up with in my pocket, I may not be able to meet that monthly mortgage payment, even though they say I qualify. So just something to look out for.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. It's like it's $700 different.
Right, right, exactly. And so that's substantial, right? And would be something that we would need to take into consideration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing to sort of answer this question of are you financially secure is you need to know your credit score, because your credit score and credit history are going to play into the type of loan that you may want to get. Okay. And we're going to come up to that here in just a second when we talk about the difference between a conventional home loan and other loan programs like an FHA loan. Those two types of loans, a conventional home loan or an FHA home loan, require different credit scores in order to qualify, right? So if we go into purchasing a home sort of blindly, like, I don't know what my credit score is, I don't know what's on my credit history, I mean, we're really sort of taking a risk and crossing our fingers in terms of what we would qualify. So it's better to go into it with your eyes open, knowing, okay, based on my credit score, I may not be able to get a conventional loan. I may have to go for an FHA, or I may have to look for other special loan programs because I don't have the credit score or I don't have enough of a down payment, right? So we'll talk specifically about that here in just a second, okay? So if we can say yes to, I have steady employment, I've been there for an extended period of time, everything's stable with my employer, don't think they're going anywhere, I have an emergency fund that's fairly significant, I am managing my debt, I'm making timely payments, my debt to income ratio is realistic, and I know exactly what my credit score is, I think we can then move forward to the next question, right? How long do we want to stay in the area? I mean, this really doesn't have much financial bearing, it would seem like, on the situation. You know, whether I stay somewhere 3 years, whether I stay somewhere for the next 30 years, doesn't really matter, right? I buy a home, I can sell it. Well, it does play into and factors into your planning, okay? First thing we have to consider in terms of why we would want to stay somewhere for an extended period of time is what is called the break-even point. So if you purchase a home, there are going to be upfront fees, appraisal fees, inspection costs, right? Origination fees on the mortgage. Like, these costs are going to be in the thousands of dollars, right? Because it is such a large major purchase, right? So in order to, and most realtors will tell you this, that in order to break even, you need to stay in the home for at least 5 to 7 years. If you sell your home before that time, the home's value might not have grown enough to cover those closing costs, right? Now, again, here's the little caveat with LA, right? Even after the real estate dip of 2008 to 2011, right? Home prices soared back, right? And people made back the equity in their real estate very quickly, right? So in general, California home values will recover much quicker than, let's say, if we purchased a place in Iowa, right? Because the demand for real estate in Iowa is not as high as it is in California. The supply is different, right? It's much easier to find a property. We're overbuilt in California. We're certainly overbuilt in LA. You can see that we're not expanding this way, we're expanding this way, right? We can only sort of build up, right? So I would say that if your plan is to stay for a shorter period of time in California, you could probably recoup your money and those costs and fees because the value of the home would probably rise much quicker in California. So you would need to maybe assess home values wherever you plan on moving to determine what is that break even point, right? Now, if you're going to purchase home and you think that's going to be where you're going to retire, you don't have to worry so much about this because it is going to be much, much longer term plan, right? So make sure you look at home values, right? Make sure that you look at neighborhoods, make sure that you look at communities in order to determine, have the home values been flat? How long have they been flat in this area? Why are they flat? Why are they declining? Why are they increasing so quickly, right? Is it becoming overcrowded? All these sorts of things are going to ultimately affect your property value, which ultimately affects your investment, right? And if you do sell the home, how it affects your equity, right? Also, employment comes back in and affects our answer to this question as well, right? Because if you're in a job, and this scenario comes up quite a bit where people think, I'm not going anywhere because of my job. And then sure enough, right, their job wants to relocate them, right? Depends on the kind of work that you do. Or their job is going to move out of state. Their employer is leaving California, and it's just not possible to work remotely. So you would sort of have to follow the job, right? And we've seen it where people will purchase a home and then be sort of stuck because now their employer is moving. So then we have a bigger sort of question to be answering about is, do we follow the employment or do we stay because we bought a home and now we've got to like find a new job, right? Because now we need that revenue to pay that mortgage. The next question is, are you ready for home ownership? Right? Man, there are days when I would love to own a home. And then I remember, I love being a renter. I was just talking to my parents who have lived in the same house for, a good 35 years. That's where I grew up. And this last week, a pipe burst under the foundation of my parents' home. And a day later, they had 12 holes throughout their entire home in the walls because they were having to rerun pipes. And they had flooding and they had to do all these repairs, right? So my parents right now, for the last week, have been living out of a hotel room. This is the hassle of home ownership, right? You know, the leaky roofs, the pipes, the repairs, the broken toilet, the broken water heater. This is when I love just sort of sitting back and going, gosh, I'm glad I'm a renter, right? Because I can transfer that risk to the actual property manager or the owner and the landlord. It's their problem, not mine, right? So it doesn't necessarily use up my resources, my finances, my time and energy. I call somebody, they got to come and take care of it, and they foot the bill, right? Now, I do run the risk of my rent being increased because of these types of repairs, right? But I'm not having to have in my emergency fund, in my cash reserve, right, funds for any of these sort of rainy day what if situations, right? So here's another rule of thumb. Real estate experts say that you should save at least 1% of the home's purchase price every year solely for repairs. Because you know they're going to happen, right? It just depends on what they are. So anywhere from minor problems, right? Like maybe you just need to fix something minor on the exterior, you need to paint or something like that, to major issues like repairing your roof. So experts say, save 1% of the home's purchase price per year. So that's something to consider. Do I have room in my budget for those what ifs? You may not want to jump into buying a home if you know you can't cover these costs, right? No matter how new the home is. we know that that stuff is going to pop up. Okay, so if your budget can't support a couple of extra $100 a month being put towards repairs, you may want to hit pause, right? And I guess too, just sort of coming back to being a renter, any of this money that you would have normally have put into a home purchase, or that you would have used for repairs and costs as being an owner, you can now pocket as a renter, right? So there are some people who choose to rent for the rest of their life, right? And I know they get flack because some people will say, oh my gosh, why are you're just throwing away money every single month, right? You're just renting, you don't actually own anything. You don't have anything to show for it. Well, what you could have to show for it is all the savings from not purchasing a home and not having to dole out for those repairs, right? So, I mean, there's always two sides to the coin. Just something to be thinking about. The next question we have to address is, what kind of home do you actually want? We have to get specific about this, right? So some people say, oh, I'll know when I see it. I'll know that home that's just for me, right? That's going to take a lot of time, energy, and research. So if you are getting serious about purchasing a home, right, it's more complicated than that, because we're trying to figure out what we need, where we have to be, how that works in conjunction with our income, our job, location, right? All these things we have to consider. So it's much more than just fantasizing about, dreaming of owning a home. Okay, so get specific. Maybe you do an actual list. What am I looking for in a home, right? Start with the easy things. I need at least this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, right? I need it to be in this particular location based on work. I then need to at least be in this price range to make it work. So whether that's the price of the home, and then break it down to, this is as much as I want to borrow, this is the down payment that I need, this is the monthly mortgage that I can afford, right? We have to start getting very, very specific. The next question we have to address is the down payment. So if you're thinking about buying a home, you really got to ask yourself, what do I have saved? How much can I put down to show lenders that I'm capable of saving? That's what they're looking for in the down payment. Yeah, it's to reduce how much you borrow, but really it's for the lenders to see, are you capable of coming in with some equity, some skin in the game, showing I have the ability to have saved enough from my income to actually purchase this home and make payments, right? So what have you saved? And then based on what you've saved, and now here we come into the credit score and the credit history, that will determine what kind of loan you may want to take on. So the down payment is going to act as the deposit, okay? So for a conventional loan, conventional home loan, you're going to need a down payment of at least 3 to 5%. 3 to 5% of what? The home purchase price. Okay. So that 3 to 5% is in order to qualify for a conventional loan, right? There may be other lender stipulations in terms of that amount. There may be other broker stipulations. Maybe the seller wants more down. Who knows? But in order to qualify for the conventional loan, you need at least 3 to 5% down. You need 3.5% for an FHA loan. 3.5%. So
It might kick us off momentarily. If so, just I'll let you guys back in. Just so
okay,
you know.
yeah.
Sorry.
If it kicks us off, then we'll just all go back into the link, same link, and Christina will let us back in. I just have this bad problem of over talking. Sorry. So let's talk about the FHA loan. Okay. FHA stands for Federal Housing Administration. So this is a federal loan. To qualify for an FHA loan, and different lenders can dole out an FHA loan, you have to, again, have at least 3.5% down. And here comes the credit score. You have to have at least a 580 and higher. So the advantage to the FHA loan is lower down payment generally and a lower credit score. So for those people that have had troubles, on their credit history, on their credit report, they've had some debt issues, it still gives a little bit of flexibility and leeway for you to borrow and get a mortgage. Now, it's going to come with some stipulations. For example, they may require what's called PMI, which is basically insurance. You're having to purchase insurance against you not making payments on the mortgage. And so that insurance cost is built into your monthly payment. So what you're doing is you're buying insurance so the lender knows, man, if you stop making payments or you default, they're going to get their money from the insurance, right? But for you, that cost of insurance is an added cost, meaning your dollars are not paying towards principal on the purchase price of the home. You're paying for some insurance, right? So the goal is to pay off this home. Well, if you have PMI or insurance as part of your monthly payment, less is going towards paying down your home. So that is one of the general stipulations of an FHA loan, is that you have this PMI. Okay, well, what credit score, Brian, do I need for a conventional home loan? At least a 620 and higher. So for a conventional loan, you may have to come in with a little bit more down and a higher credit score. The credit scores, 580 or above, 620 or above, is going to determine your interest rate, right? So the higher the credit score, the lower or the better the interest rate, because they know, oh, you have a good relationship with your debt, you've been paying it off, you've been making timely payments, you have fewer debts to be paying down, which means you're going to be able to make that monthly mortgage payment. And so a lender is going to take you on as a risk. Like we talked about before, there could be closing costs, right, associated with purchasing this home. So even if you have a down payment, you may need extra funds in your savings to cover closing costs if you can't negotiate that with the seller, right? There could be origination fees on the loans. You're going to need to have extra funds for those closing costs. Okay, now there are other programs that we can certainly give you information on. We just don't have enough time to cover all of them. But for example, there are VA home loans, right? So veterans who have served, who have had active military duty, can have special benefits with home loans. So whether you qualify or not, you can always let friends, family know that if they've served, there are these loans if they're looking to purchase. There are other federal programs for home loans as well. So if you're interested in learning more about those, feel free to shoot Christina an email. We'll all coordinate and get you the information that you need. So maybe if you want to say, look, Bryan, I only have X amount of dollars to put as a down payment, and I have this credit score. Are there any programs out there that I could qualify for? I'm a first-time home buyer. Maybe you want to look into that kind of program. Maybe you, like we talked about last time, maybe unfortunately you had to do a bankruptcy, right? Can I still somehow get a home loan? Depending on your scenario, for example, if you've had a bankruptcy, if you are a first-time home buyer, there are these specialized programs that we can find resources for you on. So if you have questions about that specifically as it pertains to you and your financial situation, give Christina and I, some of your details, like how much you save for a down payment, what is your current credit score, and then based on that, we can find you some specific information and sort of lead you down the right path if you want to learn more about what programs may be out there for you. See, I had almost made it. This is the last slide.
So close, but yet so far.
Yeah, I know. The last thing that we should seriously think about, again, is the credit score, because it's such a big part of qualifying for, such a big purchase. And you're taking on this large debt. So it's going to affect us qualifying, right? So we said, again, conventional home loan, you need a minimum of a 620, right? Some lenders may require, like I said, they may require higher, 700 or higher. FHA is 580 is sufficient, right? But if you have poor credit history, if you have debt that is in collections, if you've had a recent bankruptcy, you might not qualify at all. Okay, so that's why qualifying, checking your credit score is really important. So to that point, I'm just going to plug our next workshop where we're going to be covering the topic of how do I actually access my credit report? How do I review and read my credit history, and what does that all mean? So sort of deciphering that foreign language. So we'll talk about that in our next workshop, not next week, but the following week. And we'll show you how you can check your credit score, how you can check your credit report. Okay. So I would say this, before you start dreaming, before you start attending an open house, before you sign up for notifications from Zillow, you check your credit report, right? And we've talked about this in the past, where we can go to do this, annualcreditreport.com. Some of you have banks or credit cards that give you a free report every year, or even more than one free report. Some of you can check it as much as you want. Look at it, right? And see if there are currently any red flags, right? Any late payments, overdrawn accounts, before you start jumping into this home buying process. You don't want to start doing pre-qualification applications and just be like hoping that nothing pops up, right? It's going to be sort of a waste of your time and energy, and a disappointment at that too. So ask before you jump. That's sort of my last piece of advice, not just about credit score, but because this is one of the biggest financial decisions that you would ever make. I mean, I go so far as probably putting it up there as number one, right? It needs to be the right decision. So you don't want to just jump into anything. Just because everybody else is buying doesn't mean that you have to buy. Just because, and I get it. Maybe you're tired of apartment living. Maybe you're tired of being a renter. Maybe you want to switch that up. It doesn't mean you have to buy a home to switch that up. So really ask yourself these questions that we've gone over this evening, these 6 questions. And if you're not definitive and certain on these questions and where you stand on these questions, we need to ask more questions, right? So if you're not exactly clear on how pre-qualification works, how a loan works, if you're not clear on how do I clean up my credit history, that's the questions that I'm talking about, right?
Right.
Not what color your bedroom should be. Not what exterior paint lasts the longest. Like that's for later. That you can become an expert on that stuff later. I think what you have to focus on now are these like 6 very sort of vital questions. Did anybody have any questions here at the end that you just wanted to bring up, maybe for the benefit of others?
Fire away, people.
Yeah. Hey, Bryan, didn't they used to have 20% down as a payment a long time ago?
Yes.
Because especially with the prices of California, as you guys know, it's like, it's still almost $100,000 for some people.
Yeah, and the problem is that, and the reason why 20% was sort of that going number for a long time was that we're having to compete with all cash buyers, right? People who could come in, foreign investors, other buyers who could just plunk down the entire purchase price in cash.
Exactly.
And so to even like compete with that, sellers would want a larger down payment, right? Lenders would want a larger down payment. And so, yeah, for a long time, Vivian, you're right. 20% was sort of the rule of thumb, right? So I even think now, and we've seen it time and time again, where, it's a seller's market, meaning that there's low supply, but there's high demand. So there's a lot of buyers who are competing against each other. And so even if you're coming in with a loan, you're still having to really advocate for yourself, even as a buyer. We have good friends who are moving out of state. They had to write a letter. They recently purchased a place. They had to write a letter to the seller, trying to convince them out of the 5 offers that their offer should be taken, that they were the best sort of buyer for the property. I've heard of people sending cakes. I've heard of people doing all kinds of crazy stuff just to sort of win that property. So yeah, that's why sort of 20% down would sweeten the deal a little bit for somebody who is coming in with borrowed money versus the all cash buyer. Because for the seller, an all cash buyer means we're done. Like it's done.
Exactly. And it's so not fair for people who are just ordinary Joe, so to speak.
Yeah.
That we don't want investment property. We want a home.
Right.
So that's why I always find so frustrating in Los Angeles is that you can't really find a home.
Yeah.
Everything is an investment.
Yeah. And I think to that point, Vivian, I think it's important that you have the right broker, you have the right realtor, right? Who understands what your goal is in terms of being a long-term owner and who is really looking for a home. You're not the person who's just looking for something that you're going to flip. You're not looking for something you're just going to tear down and rebuild. Like you're actually looking at this as a long-term like home where you're going to settle. And I think it takes a different sort of realtor, in my experience with those different professionals. It takes a different kind of realtor who understands that, who can speak to sellers in that way.
Yeah.
I think that matters too. And that's definitely a consideration.
Yeah. I had a really good friend. She was very blessed with a husband that does well. They bought this home. they fixed it up and they decided to sell it, and they got their asking price for the home. But the person just wants the property. So he tore down the house that they worked so hard building up. And I thought, I don't know which is worse. I mean, the good thing, they didn't lose any money. They got everything back, but they put so much love and effort in making it to look, to look a beautiful home.
Yeah. And honestly, that can make a difference. In the case of my friends, I can imagine that it was because, hey, we're a young couple, we're starting a family. We have a young daughter, like appealing to the seller's, sort of emotional side to say, man, I put a lot of work and effort into this home. I don't want somebody coming through and just tearing it down or whatever. Some sellers don't care. They just want to get their money. They don't care what you do with the property. But yeah, definitely there are sellers who have invested time, energy, money, and there's sentimental value attached to that home, and they want to sell it to the right kind of person.
Yeah.
Definitely good point.
Yeah, it's just like, because I don't think I'm going to buy a home here in California when the time is right, because it's like, I have 10 years to retirement. It's like, I am not going to pay like a $2,000 mortgage fee. And I don't know if I want to go back to my hometown, Missouri, until it turns blue. It's like, I'm not going near you guys until you tell me that you get someone who's more compassionate to the human being.
Yeah. And I mean, all of those things too. And I mean, unfortunately, I couldn't address all of those things, but that also plays into your decision to purchase a home too, in terms of timing. Like you're saying, how close am I to retirement? What is the political climate? Where do I actually want to settle in retirement? All these sort of are extra considerations or layers that for you as a buyer are going to be different than another buyer, right? But all of that goes into the planning process.
Yeah. Because originally I was going to go to Oregon, but you know what happened there?
I mean, and it's, recently with the fires and so on, I could see where, somebody might want to put a pause on that, right?
Yeah. Because there were some people from California that moved to Oregon from the last fire. And of course, what happened? They lost their home to this fire.
Yeah.
It's like, you just can't win.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And all these sorts of things have to be taken into consideration. And that's why I'm saying, and I just sort of emphasize, it's not just a simple decision like, oh, let's just buy a home.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot that goes into it. And so we're sort of fighting that idea that, this is something we should be doing versus I have to make sure that it's the right time and the right decision for me and my current situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very true.
So our next workshop is in 2 weeks.
October 8th.
October 8th.
October 8th, yep.
Can you believe that, you guys? It's October.
I can't believe September's almost gone.
Yeah. Time has now sort of hit the turbo button, and now things are moving along very quickly after our, extended 8-month summer of COVID. So in 2 weeks, October 8th, same time, same bat channel. We'll be here 6 p.m. And we'll be talking again about how to access your credit report, how to go over that credit history, how to read that, and how to decipher what's what. And if you need to be taking any action in terms of correcting things, resolving things. So we'll dig into that next week.